Hello and welcome to Dad and Swebb Talk Sports. I'm Swebb.
And I'm Dad.
And we are the dad and daughter duo talking about all of our favorite sports moments from the week. Dad, what is up? How was your weekend? How was your week?
Pretty good so far, Swebb.
Okay.
A lot of ball games, a lot of watching of ball games. A lot of action,
All right.
Swebb. A lot of
That
action.
sounds fun. Anything in particular? Anything special happen? Anything exciting that you did
Well,
than just sitting in a chair watching sports?
I went over and saw some of the tennis tournament over at the Charleston Credit One tennis tournament.
Okay, that's a women's tennis tournament for those who don't know, with some of the top players in the world.
Yep.
So that's
And-
good. You're getting out of the house.
And the winner of the Australian Open, Madison Keys, she's going to be in the tournament this week. So
Yeah,
I
they
was
have a
over
pretty
there.
good lineup. Madison Keys, Jessica Pegula, Emma Navarro, and some other international players, but those are the top Americans are playing in this tournament. It's a WTA 500. So you've got your Masters and your four championships that happen throughout the year, and then you've got your WTA 1000. So those are tournaments with the top players. You get 1,000 points towards your world ranking if you play in that tournament, and then WTA 500 is mid-tier, so just a step down, but you normally will get some of the top players playing in those tournaments.
Yeah, there's some real good players over there. And it's a tremendous facility. I might take you over there when you're here, Swebb.
Well, we're definitely going to go see some tennis. I'm excited about that. Anything else? Anything else you want to tell people? Anything else that was exciting?
Knicks basketball, Yankee baseball. The baseball season has started in full flight. And we'll see what happens. The transfer portal for college basketball.
So should we jump right into sports, or you want to ask me how my weekend was?
Well-
Normally when you have a conversation, you go back and forth, right? I ask you a question, you ask me a question.
How was your weekend, Swebb?
My weekend was good. It was a nice traditional New York City weekend. I call it bopping around the city. I had dinner in Soho on Friday. I had drinks and watched basketball at a bar uptown on Friday night. Saturday went to the Museum of Natural History with some church friends. We did a little scavenger hunt in the museum. I walked through the park because it was like 75, 80 degrees on Saturday, and then went and met up with a friend for dinner and just like hanging out in the neighborhood on the afternoon. And then Sunday had church, so it was a pretty good weekend.
You went to the Museum of Natural History?
I did. I went to the Museum of Natural History.
When I was like in middle school, my parents signed me and my brother up, Douglas, up for a program at the planetarium every single Saturday morning. So we were down there, and then while we were waiting, because it's attached to the Museum of Natural History, while we were waiting for my father to come back and pick us up, we had time to, and most of the kids that were in these classes were like high school and college kids, and we were middle school. So it was a lot of fun. I
So you
did
still
like
have
the planetarium,
PTSD.
though. I did like the planetarium.
You know what? I haven't been to the Museum of Natural History I think since like 2014, maybe. It's still as I remember it. I was there. I joined a small group, what we call small groups at church, and they do a hangout every other Saturday. So this past weekend was the first Saturday of us getting together. We separated into teams. We had a scavenger hunt where we had to find different things around the museum, like, take a picture in front of a diorama of an animal that's still living, take a picture of the oldest thing in the museum, all of these different things. So we did that. It was actually kind of fun, and it was a good way to check out the whole entire museum in like an hour and a half.
We used to have day camp trips and school trips to the museum. I went to that museum so many times. I'm sorry I missed that scavenger hunt. Swebb.
I'm not
Sounds
sure
like
that
a
you
lot
would
of
have been
fun.
good on a scavenger hunt, because the whole point is that you have to be the first team to complete the whole list, which means you have to move pretty swiftly. There was some going up and down steps. There was some walking very fast to make sure that we got back in time. So I'm not sure that you would be the best person to have on a team for a scavenger hunt.
No. Did you watch any of the Duke Notre Dame lacrosse game?
I did not watch any lacrosse. I did watch some college basketball. I watched the Knicks, of course, and I watched the Yankees. So should we get into the Yankees?
Yes, let's go.
All right, so MLB started fast and furious on Thursday afternoon. The Yankees had their home opener against the Milwaukee Brewers, and I'm wearing my Yankee shirt, the Bronx Bombers. This was actually your former shirt, and boy, have they been bombing and bashing.
Yes, they have. But remember, it's only 3 games, Swebb, so take it easy.
They're on pace to be 162-0.
Yeah, just take it easy, Swebb.
So they played 3 games this weekend against the Milwaukee Brewers, won all 3 games, outscored the Brewers 36-14. In those first 3 games, collectively as a team, they hit 15 home runs and drove in, obviously, 35 runs. 36 is how many they scored. Batting average of .333. So the big news, though, is the Torpedo bats.
I know. And you know what? As I was reading stuff today, it seems like those bats came out last year, and there were numerous players on different teams around the league, around Major League Baseball, that started using those bats last year. So all of a sudden now it's like the big thing. And there's only 5 guys on the Yankees using it.
Well, all of a sudden it's a big thing because the Yankees are using it, and the haters are going to hate, That's what happens. If you're either with us or you're against us. And so the Yankees, they put up 36 runs on the Milwaukee Brewers, partially because the Brewers were throwing the ball right down the middle of the plate. They even had to have some field position players pitch, which is something you don't want to see in the first 3 games of the season. But these bats are more shape of a bowling pin, the bottom of a bowling pin, as opposed to a traditional baseball bat. And they're legal. They are legal. MLB has requirements in the size and length of the bats. And so the weight is just shifted a little bit more towards an area where batters usually make contact with the baseball. So this was created by a former MIT grad, physics professor at the University of Michigan, who gave up his career in teaching because he wanted to be in sports and went and worked for a baseball organization and got his his legs under him in baseball, ended up with the Yankees, and realized through his studies that these bats allow for batters, when they make proper contact in that area, to hit the ball further than they would with a traditional bat.
Because after doing analytics, he found out that there were a number of players on the Yankees that were making most of their contact at a certain portion of the bat. So he moved most of the meat, if you so to speak, to that portion. If I grab one of those bats, that could be dangerous. I might make a comeback.
Well, you still have to make contact, right? I think people are forgetting that you still have to make contact with the ball. Yes, this is a bat that players across MLB have been using since last year across various different teams. I don't know that I love that Michael Kay was bragging about the bats, because
he blew the whole thing up.
Yeah, it's like you can't keep a secret. The bats are the bats. Let people figure it out themselves, and then that's it. So all this time in the off season, we were wondering what kind of moves the front office was going to make. Little did we know that we had a physicist on our side who had figured out that the best way to hit the ball harder is to have this legally shaped bat.
The Baltimore Orioles put in an order for those bats. But see, what he did was he matched it up with each player on the team first, right, through analytics. It's not just get a bat. You give me one of those bats. What am I going to do with that?
Right. Nothing is the answer to that question. But those bats, right, they're the same weight of a typical bat for each player. So it's not slowing down your swing. It doesn't feel any different as a hitter using that bat. So the Yankees did some major damage to the Milwaukee Brewers. I wish them luck, because it seems like they have problems in that whole entire rotation and bullpen. But so far they look good. And one player who's not using the bats, and we just look at the home runs that were hit. Out of the 15 that were hit, Jazz Chisholm's using the bat. He had 3 home runs. Anthony Volpe is using the bat. He had 2 home runs this weekend, and Austin Wells had 2 home runs as well using the bat. One player not using the bat, Aaron Judge.
The best home run hitter in baseball.
And Aaron Judge hit 4 home runs to start the season in 3 games, went 6 for 11 with a .545 batting average, an on-base percentage of .643, and a slugging percentage of 1.818. So also scored 8 runs, drove in 11 RBIs, hit 3 home runs in 1 game. Aaron Judge said, I don't have to use the torpedo bats. My results speak for themselves over the past couple seasons. And that is my captain. That makes me emotional. That makes me very happy to hear my captain say those things.
He's a father now, you know.
He's a father. He's a girl dad. And guess what? He can still mash regardless of if he is a torpedo bat or a regular bat. So that's the Yankees. They play on Tuesday against the Arizona Diamondbacks. We'll see how things continue. It doesn't hurt when you're putting up 20 runs in a game, and the rotation doesn't have to be perfect in those instances. I know that they're not going to be averaging 11 runs per game or 12 runs per game all season, but so far, so good for the Yankees.
Slow down. Easy.
Listen, I'm not going to say that they're winning the World Series yet. Like, the Dodgers are 5-0. The Yankees are one of 3 teams that are undefeated so far. It's a long season. 162 games is a lot. But right now, we're on track to be 162-0.
Okay.
Just saying. And averaging 12 runs a game.
Okay. Slow down, Tiger. Slow down.
I'm allowed to have something good. We've been crying every episode for the past couple of weeks between UNC petering out of the tournament and the Knicks and Jalen Brunson being hurt for since the beginning of March. So we're closing in on a month of him being hurt. I'm allowed to have something good. All right. So let's talk about the Knicks, because the Knicks, despite the odds and some of their inconsistencies on the West Coast road trip a few weeks ago, they're actually 20 games above 500 with 8 games left in the season. So they're 47-27. They clinched a playoff spot between last week's episode and now, as we're recording on a Monday night. And they're coming off of 2 straight wins, one on Sunday versus Portland and one on Friday night at Milwaukee.
They're playing with their 4th string point guard now.
They're playing with a guy who hadn't even seen the court for most of the season. So, as a reminder, I just mentioned Jalen Brunson. He's been out with a sprained ankle. He has been cleared for basketball activities, so we're hoping he can get back into the lineup before the postseason. Also, he's 4 games shy of 65, which is the minimum. Not that it's about individual awards, but it is the minimum that the NBA mandates for anyone to be eligible for any postseason award. So I would love to see him be able to play 4 more games to at least get to that 65, because he does deserve recognition, and it's not like this is load management. The guy hurt himself and has really played up until the beginning of March, had really played all season.
By the way, that he's been out for almost a month now. That is not a regular sprained ankle. They're not telling us, but I guarantee you he tore ligaments in that ankle because he had a walking boot on for a few weeks. Remember when your brother tore ligaments in the ankle?
Yes.
Okay.
He likely tore some ligaments, and that's why he's been out. And, it affects, obviously, the way you run. It affects the way you play defense. It affects the way you jump on your jump
Not just that,
shot.
it takes longer to heal.
Right.
And that's not a regular sprained ankle.
No.
That was torn ligaments, but they're not saying it. And they consider torn ligaments a sprained ankle. And when you're in the NBA, they keep you out for a long time until it's totally healed. When you're in college, like your brother was, you're back in 2 weeks.
Well, here's the thing. Bucknell wasn't necessarily competing for a Patriot League championship, let alone an NCAA championship, as you are when you're on a winning team in the NBA and you have a chance to make some noise in the playoffs and maybe make a deep run. with everyone healthy in the right circumstances, yes, we'll make sure that Jalen Brunson is healthy. But they've also had some other injuries. We mentioned that they're on their fourth string point guard. Cam Payne also has a sprained ankle. He sprained it against the Los Angeles Clippers on March 26th, so last week. And Deuce McBride has a left groin strain. He's been out since March 20th, so he's been out for a few weeks as well. So, you know what? Guys have stepped up. OG Anunoby has stepped up. Josh Hart has been having an incredible season, but he stepped up. Mikal Bridges, we've talked about the inconsistency of Mikal Bridges, and it's, I think, part of the challenge when they went on that road trip a few weeks ago is they couldn't necessarily find their groove as a team without Jalen Brunson, their best player, their point guard, and their facilitator on offense. Now, some of these guys, like OG Anunoby, he's had 6 straight games of 20-plus points. That's his best offensive string of games his whole entire career. So now guys, it seems like, are starting to understand their roles, take the ball to the hoop a lot more, and also I think they had 25 or 26 assists yesterday.
Yep.
On Sunday night.
Yep, and it was Walt Frazier's 80th birthday. I can't believe it.
And he was styling and profiling.
I cannot believe it. Seems like yesterday it was played.
So the Knicks are 12 and a half games back of Cleveland. They're not obviously going to catch them with only 8 games left. 8 games back of Boston, and then 4 games ahead of Indiana. So they're securely right now in that third spot in the Eastern Conference. That means right now, looking at the standings, they would likely play the Milwaukee Bucks in the first round of the playoffs. So, they have a tough schedule. They're going to be playing Cleveland twice in these last 8 games. They're going to play Boston once, and then they're going to play teams like Atlanta and Detroit that have been tough all season long and also wouldn't mind ruining a party or two. So, this week, they play Wednesday at Cleveland, Saturday Atlanta, Sunday at Phoenix, and tomorrow, Tuesday night, at Philly. So a bit of a tough stretch. Some teams that are trying to move up, and teams that we've struggled against all season in Boston and Cleveland.
Yep. And in order to get anywhere, to get where you want to go, you're going to have to go through both of them in the playoffs.
But I think part of the story on Sunday's game is that game was very close in the first half, lots of points given up, and then the defensive intensity was turned up in the second half against Portland. So if they can, we see now with the addition of Mitch Robinson into the lineup, Precious Achiuwa has been strong defensively all season long. You can change up the rotation a little bit, have guys playing at the same time that allow for the Knicks to be a better defensive team, which is something that they weren't doing the first part of the season.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a shame. These injuries always prop up at the wrong times. Around playoff
Here's the
time.
thing. You got to control the controllables. You never know what's going to happen. People can get injured at all times. Last year, or was it 2 years ago? I think it was last year. The Knicks were about to have an open tryout during the playoffs because so many guys were hurt. They were about to start dressing the guy who sells popcorn in the arena. So this happens, right? But it's how you step up to the plate in baseball terminology when given the opportunities. And I think now, and maybe you never want to see your best player hurt, right? But maybe this is a little bit of a blessing in disguise if Jalen Brunson can come back healthy, because now we're starting to see guys step up in OG Anunoby and Mikal Bridges offensively. So, and Karl Anthony Towns only scored about 10 or 11 points on Sunday. So we're starting to see other guys, which we mentioned. It can't just be the Jalen Brunson and Karl Anthony Towns show. You need a third and fourth scorer, particularly in the playoffs. So this might just be, and I'm trying to be optimistic because it's all about perspective, right? So the perspective that I'm seeing is, hey, I'm not going to get ahead of myself, but these guys are starting to come alive at the right time with 8 games left in the season.
Very much needed. So, and more guys are contributing. which will be helpful in the playoffs. But
Okay.
the playoffs are a different game than the regular season. Things get a lot tighter.
Sure. And do I feel overly confident or even mildly confident? No, because they haven't played well against Cleveland and Boston, and that potentially could be a team that they face if they can get through the first round that they would face in the second round. To get to the NBA Finals, they would have to likely go through both Cleveland and Boston, and they haven't won a game against them all season.
They haven't even played a close game against either one of them.
So do I feel confident? No, but I'm trying to be positive here, okay? This week has been a good week. Last week we were down. Our teams were struggling. Our team seasons were over. The Yankees had all these injuries before their season even started. We talked about all the guys that were out and who they were having to fill into slots and using some breadcrumbs in the rotation. And hey, they ended up scoring 12 runs a game, and it didn't matter who was on the mound. So I think I'm just trying to be positive. This is it's like any unhealthy relationship. You got your highs, you got your lows. Sometimes you feel like you're in love. Sometimes you feel like you hate each other. That's just it.
True.
So let's talk some college basketball, because the Final Four set, all number one seeds for the second time in history, all number one seeds make it to the Final Four. So Houston will play against Duke. Florida will play against Auburn. 3 of my 4 Final Four teams have made it. I am right now tied for first with my friend Dan for the Dad and Swebb bracket challenge. So I have the potential to finish first for 2 years in a row. Dan and I both have the same Final Four situation here. We didn't have Auburn in, or he might have had Auburn in. Either way, he has got 3 Final Four teams in, and as do I. But he has Duke winning. I have Houston winning. So the showdown is going to come down to whether Houston or Duke win.
But I have Florida winning.
You have Florida winning, but Clemson is who you had in the Final Four.
And they lost
Your
in the first
maximum
round.
amount of points. So for Dan and I, our max amount of points was 1610 that we have left. Yours was like 1430. So you're now, I think, in third or fourth. Sorry, my friend.
I was riding high in first place for like a week and a half.
You were riding high until really Clemson conked out in the first round. That had already put you behind, because you had all your other teams go through. But losing one of your Final Four teams early is never a good sign.
Yeah.
But let's talk about college basketball for a minute here, because as we talked about last week, the transfer portal is open. We equate this to free agency starting at the end of a professional season, while some teams are in the playoffs and some teams are at home watching the playoffs. The transfer portal is open. We've got coaches moving all over the place. And I just can't help but think how disappointed I am in the NCAA and this whole entire situation. We've got players who are going on visits with teams that are still playing and teams that are out. We've got coaches deciding that they're going to leave their coaching position as of last week, when there were still 16 teams in. University of Maryland coach had already said he was going to Villanova, even though his team was still playing.
That was horrible. What he did to those kids was horrible.
So here's the thing. I can't even fault the players themselves for jumping into the transfer portal while their teams are still playing, if coaches are doing the same thing. There's no loyalty on either side of the coin here. And I'm all for people getting paid, right? Like, I was a little slow to the game in terms of allowing athletes to get paid, because I think when you go to a big-time sports school, you're the big man or the star woman on campus if you're part of a team. You get a lot of perks just from being part of a team and being part of something, Division I sports. There's nothing like it. My problem now, and I love that players are able to use their marketing acumen. We've talked about this in the fall. players from some of these teams and some of these sports that maybe aren't as big as football and basketball making serious money because they have a huge social media following and because they're content creators. My issue is there are no guardrails here. The guardrails are pretty much non-existent between having the transfer portal be open during the basketball season and allowing coaches to also leave during the season while their teams are still playing. I just don't know how you fix it.
Well, the NCAA, that's the governing body over college sports, the leadership is horrible. If you had a strong leadership there, you wouldn't have all this stuff going on, okay? And remember, you're dealing with kids, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. And these coaches are hopping all over the place. Kids know that there's no loyalty. Kids are leaving, visiting, cutting deals with other schools in the middle of their season, in the middle of the playoffs. This is horrible. You're going to destroy everything. You can't have this. This is horrible. And this is why the Roy Williams, the Coach K's, Coach Wright at Villanova, this is why those oldest, very successful coaches saying, you know what, bye-bye. I'm Jim Boeheim up in Syracuse. I'm not dealing with this foolishness. This is total nonsense.
Well, I think part of the problem with the NCAA is that they're still acting like this is amateur sports, but really this is a business, and it's gotten so sketchy because of all the money that they have no guardrails and no morals on either side. So I don't fault the players for wanting to leave when your coach leaves. University of Maryland and Villanova, as far as I'm concerned, it's like apples and apples here. These aren't like, it's not like you're going from American University to the University of Maryland. You're going from a top D1 program in a major conference to another one in a major conference. And so to me, I'm like, what is the point anymore with these, with all of this, right? Like, at some point, and I don't know who makes that decision, at some point, someone's got to say, you know what? No, I don't need to leave because I've built a program here. I've built a culture. The team is getting better. Maryland was irrelevant for a bit, but now they're back.
Well, you have some guys that do that. Mark Few out at Gonzaga. He's not leaving, okay? Hurley up at UConn. He was offered the Lakers job. He said, no, I don't want it. I'm staying with UConn.
And certainly you have Tom Izzo, right?
Tom Izzo at Michigan State.
It's not just, okay, so there are guys that do it, but there aren't enough.
That's true.
At some point, there needs to be just a culture shift, right? This isn't just about guardrails. This is a culture shift about, I recruited these players. I poured into these players. I sold them a bag of goods.
And their parents.
And the parents. And hopefully it's good stuff, right? And it's not just, hey, come because I need you. But it's you truly pour into them as young men, young women who, are developing as athletes, but also developing as people. So at some point, people need to say, you know what? No, I'm committed to this organization. Here's why. It's one thing if there are a few blue chip opportunities that maybe you leave for. And I think one of those is if you were a college player yourself and you get the opportunity to go back and coach the program that you played for. I think there are also a few like, Xavier, that coach from Xavier is going to Texas. Like I get the idea of going to Texas, but he also was the coach at Arizona. And sometimes you're in situations where you get fired or let go.
Well, you know what happened? He was doing a whole lot of under the table stuff at Arizona because the pressure was too high. He's better off at a school like Xavier where it's small. Now he's going to go to Texas. Do you know the pressure he's going to have at Texas to win?
And they don't just have pressure for the college basketball. They have pressure for like track and field
Everything.
And volleyball.
Everything.
So I just I get it if you were an alum of a school and you get the opportunity to go back and coach them, or you're from a certain area and your family and it's the opportunity to be back with your family. I don't want to give too many like reasons why you should be able to go back, because I do think that if you make a commitment somewhere, that you should honor that commitment. And we've had this whole jacked up culture now of, let me run to the next paycheck, let me run to, and because of that, the athletes do it themselves. And I don't fault the athletes for doing it, because you're 17, 18, 19 years old. It's like, well, my coach is leaving to go to this school, or, everyone else is doing it. Why am I going to leave money on the table that I could have, that could set up me for the rest of my life if I, decide to make a move? I don't fault them for that. But the whole thing is just, I don't like it.
And the money for the coaches is pretty much in the same ballpark, regardless at these higher levels, no matter where you're coaching. Okay,
Right.
You're going to coach at once. You're not like you're making $40,000 at one school and $10 million at another school. These guys are all up there in the multi-millions. Okay.
The salaries are all consistent when you're at one of the big programs in terms of coaching. For the players, though, hey, if you get an opportunity, like there's no guarantee that you're going to make the NBA. There's no guarantee that you're going to be healthy the whole entire time that you're playing. So I do understand why players might want to leave, especially if they don't necessarily feel like it's a good fit. I totally understand when players leave if their coach leaves or gets fired. But it sucks, because we're pretending like it's amateur sports and these are kids and all these things, and like it also just adds a ton of pressure to a bunch of teenagers, because they're paid employees. So now your expectations for them are different. Like, your expectation for a volunteer is different than your expectation for someone who's on the books. All right? So now we have all this, like,
it's a lot of pressure. When a kid signs a contract,
that leave schools because maybe they didn't play up to their potential or what you thought that they were going to be coming out of high school, and now it's like they go on Twitter, they go on Instagram, they listen to wherever, they walking around campus and they're walking into stores, and you got people who are poking and prodding at them because these fans are like, well, there's all this money being made and I'm paying to go to the game, so I want you to win.
A lot of these kids, all these teams are now negotiating their contract for next year, and a lot of them are going to have to take pay cuts because they didn't live up to what they negotiated for last year. So then they'll put their name in the transfer portal and go to another school trying to get another deal. It's undue pressure on children to live up to multi-million-dollar contracts. This is totally ridiculous, okay? And it's out of hand now.
So I say all that to say that UNC still has work to do, because and so does the University of Miami from that regard. I'm not going to get too worked up on what I am seeing or not seeing yet, because sometimes you just need time. Like, people want to have opinions before it's all said and done, because there are players that would be a good fit in this UNC system that are visiting other schools and have announced that there are certain schools that are their top. We'll see. Elliot Cadeau obviously is now transferred. He's transferred to Michigan, so the UNC is in need of a starting point guard. Donovan Dent, who was one of the best players in the portal from New Mexico, transferred to UCLA, but he's also from California. So you miss out on a player like that. There's talk about Isaac McNeely from Virginia.
Virginia Tech. Virginia, right.
The center from Nevada. But they need a point guard. They also need a shooting guard. And they need some size. So you got to play with the hand you're dealt. But I don't know how we fix it. And maybe we get into more detail in a future episode. So, Dad.
Yes.
What are you looking forward to this upcoming week?
Oh, well, you're coming down here. I'm looking forward to seeing you, hanging out with you.
I am coming down to South Carolina. We've got some tennis that we're going to go see. Mom is walking in a 10K race. I'm going to try and run, although I'm not in shape. So I'm not even really looking forward to the race because I am not ready. But I'm looking forward to the meal that I will have after the race.
Well, where are you taking us?
You're going to be the one taking us because I'm going to be tired and I'm going to have to be thrown into the car. But I know that I'll be hungry after running 6.2 miles. So make sure your wallet is ready.
Yeah, this is a great IHOP. I have some coupons.
I don't do IHOP. Nope, won't do it. Anything else you're looking forward to?
More baseball. The Final Four this weekend. Duke lost to Notre Dame the other day. My man Andrew McAdory had a real good game. He scored 2 goals and 1 assist. They go up to Boston University this weekend, so they need a win before they get into a heavy ACC schedule where the competition's going to be real good. So we'll see what happens. But he's having a real good... the game was on ESPNU. You know how when these broadcasts come on of whatever sport, they always highlight the top player on each team?
Yes.
So they highlight the top player on Notre Dame. He went to Chaminade in Mineola, Long Island. And then who's the top player on Duke? Andrew McAdory. And they talk about him.
I love that. I'm looking forward to some women's tennis, as we mentioned. I'm also looking forward to the NCAA women's gymnastics postseason starts this weekend. So we should see some good college gymnastics in the next 2 weeks. And then Grand Slam track. This is a new track league started by Michael Johnson.
Oh.
The 400, 200, 400 winner, gold medalist, Olympic gold medalist in the 1996 Olympic Games that was in Atlanta. He's started a new track league that will feature and is paying to get the top athletes in. So there's a list of competitors, and then they have a list of challengers, which are some of those people that maybe aren't as well known, but that could upset some of the favorites. So it kicks off. They have 4 meets this year. This weekend will be in Kingston, Jamaica. I'm looking forward to seeing it because they will be on TV. They'll have the top talent. And it's just good to see track, at least on this side of the globe, this similar time zone, and some of the top talent competing in the meets.
So these are pro track
These
stars.
are pro runners. So you'll have Sydney McLaughlin, Gabby Thomas. You'll have some of the big runners in all of the races. So I'm looking forward to it. And before we close things out, do you want to leave us with a dad tip of the week?
Yeah. How's that saying go? Don't count your chickens before they hatch. Let's not get too excited about baseball stats after 3 games with 159 games to go. Take it easy there, slugger.
Well, in that regard, let's not get too worked up about torpedo bats with only 3 games as well.
Right,
so
I agree with that too.
Don't get too excited and don't hate too much on the Yankees, all right? Quit your hating.
But they're not the only team using them.
Of course
a
they're
few
not.
players on the Giants are using them. The Orioles now ordered
The Cubs, yeah, there are players all over the place using them. Like Adley Rutschman, he hit a whole bunch of home runs this weekend. I didn't hear anyone talking about him using a torpedo bat.
But the Yankees were the only team that had an announcer that had to go and start bragging about it on the air.
Right. It's like, some things are allowed to be in-house. Okay, so that concludes this week's episode of Dad and Swebb Talk Sports. Be sure to follow us at Dad and Swebb on Instagram and X. Subscribe on YouTube and Rumble, and share this episode with a friend. We will see you next week.
So long.
Thank you for tuning into Dad and Swebb Talk Sports, the show where we cover all of our favorite sports moments from the past week. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube and Rumble, and follow us at Dad and Swebb on Instagram and X. See you next week.